This is Dave, and this is Dave's Worldview. I'm going to cover a laundry list of reasons why I think voters should re-elect President Trump. Now, some things on my list I have already vlogged about, and others I plan to cover in future videos. And speaking of videos, please like and share my video and hit the subscribe button. Now, since the economy is the top issue for voters going into the 2020 election, I think that is an excellent place to start. President Trump's economic policies, including cutting corporate tax rates and getting rid of excessive regulations, had our economy firing on all cylinders. Before President Trump successfully passed legislation to cut the corporate tax rate to 21%, the corporate tax rate in the United States was 40%, which was the second highest in the world. Now, having the second highest corporate tax rate in the world was causing companies to flee the United States for tax relief in Mexico and other countries overseas. But cutting corporate tax rates has encouraged many companies to return to the United States, bringing much needed jobs with them. Lower corporate tax rates have also encouraged companies to invest in growth, which has created additional jobs. The resulting lower unemployment in the United States has led to significant wage increases for many Americans as employers compete for workers. Unfortunately, COVID did a lot of damage to our economy. But I trust President Trump to get the economy back on track. In contrast, Joe Biden's economic policies, which include raising corporate tax rates, would return the United States to economic stagnation and encourage companies to flee the United States once again to compete in the global economy. Now, let's, just being real here, the Democratic Party's platform is based on globalism. They are not concerned with the United States of America. They are citizens of the globe. And when President Obama talked about redistributing wealth, he did not mean that he was going to distribute the wealth of the rich to the poor in this country. What he meant was he was going to redistribute the wealth of the United States all around the world. So let's just be real about that, okay? Now, another big issue with voters this election is Supreme Court nominations and confirmations. I have no doubt the Democratic leaders would have done what the Republicans did with President Obama's Merrick Garland nomination if the shoe had been on the other foot. And given a chance, Obama would have nominated a Supreme Court justice, just as Trump did Amy Coney Barrett. Unfortunately for the Democrats, in both cases, the voters chose to allow Republicans to control the Senate. Now, when I think about the Democrats' treatment of Brett Kavanaugh, their Russian collusion coup attempt, and then their impeachment of President Trump in an election year, I think they got the treatment they deserve from the Republicans. Besides, when you consider the legal nightmares that Democrats may be setting up by encouraging massive mail-in voting and the likelihood of post-election lawsuits, we may need that ninth justice to avoid a deadlocked Supreme Court. Now, I did a Google search as far as mail-in voting and that kind of thing. And you know what? Most of the stuff that comes up at the top of a Google search makes it sound like it's not a problem. But you don't have to go very far. Look down about maybe on the bottom of the page of the search or the next page. There's been massive problems even with just using mail-in voting for districts, let alone nationwide. Not to mention that the states that do use it have spent years putting it in setting it up. And, states trying to do mail-in voting on the fly is just a recipe for disaster. Now, on a side note, I recently made 2 trips from Denver to Washington, D.C. And if they think it's safe to fill up every seat on an airplane for a 3-hour flight, I think most of us can safely vote in person. And speaking of safety, COVID-19 is another hot button issue, as it should be. When we were just learning that COVID would be a serious problem, I pulled back from covering political matters for a little bit because I didn't think the timing was appropriate. I thought it was a good time for Americans to pull together. But it didn't take me long to figure out that every issue is a political issue with the left. Let's remember that when President Trump put a travel ban on flights coming from China, he was attacked by Democratic leaders across the country as being xenophobic. Then Democratic leaders in California and New York encouraged business as usual just to be in opposition to the president. Sadly, Democrats also opposed the president when he banned flights from Europe. Now, I don't think Joe Biden would have done a better job. He made it clear that he opposed President Trump's travel bans. And the only reason we are not in another Great Depression is that some level-headed leaders realize that the cure can't be worse than the disease. And I also have to say, I always get those two guys in New York confused, but the mayor of New York, de Blasio, I think he intentionally sent that disease into his nursing homes. Not only does that increase the body count, and we're probably the only state, the only nation that blames our president for COVID deaths. We're the only ones doing that. This is beyond ridiculous. Anyhow, personally, I'm 60 years old, and you know what? Don't destroy the economy for me. You know what I mean? I'm considered high risk because of my age. Don't destroy the economy for me. I have children and grandchildren, and I want them to have a great future. I don't want them to be standing in soup lines. And let's put the COVID-19 mortality rate in perspective. Suicides account for 145 deaths per million people in the U.S. every year. In contrast, COVID has resulted in 73 deaths per million in people under the age of 55. So roughly twice as many people under 55 have died from suicide in 2020 compared to COVID-19. So it would seem to me that if you're under age 55 and have no underlying medical condition, the risk is minimal. While at the same time, those that are high risk should take more precautions. Now, just to cover a lot of issues quickly, I'm going to finish up with my response to a social media post accusing conservatives of being one-issue voters. That one issue being abortion. The writer also depicted conservatives as pro-gun, pro-war, pro-death penalty, pro-poverty, pro-rich, and pro-Russian. Now, I will add a little more information out of compassion for the victims of bad ideas, but this was my response. I said, funny, I see Democrats as two camps of one-issue voters. Camp number one of Democrats' one-issue voters is the abortion infanticide camp. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that I have compassion for anyone that regrets their decision to abort and those that felt they had no option but to abort their babies. And that includes the fathers who often have no say in the abortion decision-making process. I'm not trying to condemn anyone. Jesus Christ paid the price so that no sin is beyond the forgiveness of God. All you have to do is ask God for that forgiveness, and He will give it freely. But I must say that abortion till the day of birth for any reason is infanticide and murder, even by the standards of secular science. To put things in perspective, the United States is also one of only 7 countries that allow elective abortion after 20 weeks of gestation. And only the United States, China, and North Korea allow abortion till the day of birth for any reason. Just think about that. When it comes to putting a value on human life, we now have the same standards as China and North Korea. Now, camp number 2 of Democratic one-issue voters are the total gender confusion camp. I think total gender confusion will have enormous psychological consequences on entire generations of children. By some counts, there are now more than 50 genders in this camp. There are many areas of concern, but I will only cover 2 of them. Brown University did a study on sudden onset gender dysphoria that showed clusters of preteen and teenage girls with shared social media presence that came out as transgender. Brown University then pulled their peer-reviewed study because of pressure from transgender activists. I think it's outrageous to see peer-reviewed research in this area censored, since sudden onset gender dysphoria is a new phenomenon and more research is needed. The second area of concern is puberty-blocking drugs for gender-confused children. Since studies show that 85 to 90% of children are no longer gender-confused after puberty, and transgender people have a 20 to 25 times higher suicide rate, even after hormone therapy and surgery, puberty blockers for children may be child abuse. Anyhow, I continued my reply to the social media post accusing conservatives of being, one-issue voters. I wrote, Democrats using racism to get out to vote is racist, and Democrats support the National Education Association for their member votes instead of vouchers and charter schools to enhance the education of our children. Democrats also promote critical theory and identity politics, which only causes tribalism and division, leaving no room for healing. President Trump, far from being pro-war, is the first president since Reagan not to start a new war. As far as poverty is concerned, many black conservatives would argue that excessive social programs are responsible for devastating black communities. Under Trump, unemployment was nearly non-existent, and wages rose for the first time in a decade. As far as being pro-gun, after watching a 4-year coup attempt, I am more pro-gun than ever. The Democrats have proven that they will do anything to gain power. They have suggested lowering the voting age, packing the Supreme Court, and abolishing the Electoral College. Even when it comes to global warming, AOC telling people that we have 12 years to save the planet is a great way to build a cult, but it doesn't give our children much hope for their future. Vote for us or you'll die is what they're actually saying. Oh, and by the way, Democrats say our past sucks too. Nothing but white supremacy and slave traders in our family tree. They shame our children for their past and rob them of their future. It is easy to make the case that the Democratic Party is wrong on almost every issue. And if you still believe President Trump colluded with Russia, I am probably wasting my time responding to your post reply, I wrote. By the way, I am more concerned with the Marxist communist wing taking over the Democratic Party than with the communists in Russia. So unless by one issue voter, you mean a voter that can't find one issue on which they can agree with the Democratic Party? I am not a one issue voter. There are tons of reasons to vote for President Trump, and I look forward to casting my vote in person. I hope you will too. But anyhow, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and share my videos. And have a great day, and don't forget to go vote. And if you want to live in a free country, I'd vote Republican.